How's it going, everybody? This is going to be another one of those less edited videos because I am still dealing with burnout, and K-Fox is currently dealing with a whole bunch of other stuff at the moment, so it's me solo, and I want to talk about something that came across my Facebook feed recently, and it means a lot more to me than maybe it should, but then I did some digging and realized that, we might be kind of fucked, just a little bit. So it was one of those posts where Trump goes onto Twitter or Truth Social or onto, Facebook and reposts on the whitehouse.gov or whatever the hell, the same thing that he posted on another platform. So here he's got a Truth Social post where he says, record cold wave expected to hit 40 states. Rarely seen anything like it before. Could the environment insurrectionists please explain whatever happened to global warming? And then, of course, it's posted from the official White House page as well, saying, the same thing, just, quoting him. And on the one hand, I want to look at this and say that our president is being an absolute moron and make fun of him for not understanding that global warming is a larger part of climate change, and the reason that we use climate change now instead of using global warming for everything is because climate change is more of an all-encompassing thing, of which the usual warming of the globe happens to be part of the conundrum. But then I started to realize Donald Trump's not stupid. That's not what's going on here. Because, yes, he is an idiot. Let me go ahead and make that perfectly clear. He is an idiot, but when he does things, when he posts things on the internet, when he does any of this, he's doing it not just from a place of, the boisterous jock syndrome idiocy that is, was ever so popular in the fucking 90s. It's not just that. He's also doing it because it signals something to his base. This is a man who has been media trained to the nines and knows that when he says things, and he doesn't say them out into the ether, he knows he is saying things for a camera, for a purpose, for an organization. And when viewing the things he does through that lens, I think we find a lot more interesting to talk about than just the president of the United States is stupid. Make no mistake. He is stupid, but many of his actions are not stupid. They are for a purpose. That purpose could be entirely bad, wrong, evil, self-defeating. It can be all of those things. But there is a purpose and a method behind that madness. And I want to explore that with you right now. So come on, check out what we're doing here. This is going to be a little bit of a fun journey. Shouldn't be too long of a video, but I do want to make a pitch to you before I continue on with the video. If you haven't come here to my channel before, my name is Suris. I'm sometimes like this, sometimes in VTuber mode, but either way, I talk about things that matter to me. I talk about politics, I talk about changing things in hobby spaces. These are things that mean a lot to me, and I've got secondary channels to talk about some of this stuff too, but if you want somebody who just talks about the things that he cares about, then please consider subscribing to my channel. I try to be unbiased. I try to be fair. I often fail at those things, but I will try more than ever, every time I am doing one of these things, to be authentic. And if that's something that you value, maybe subscribe to my channel, maybe even let a few friends know what I'm doing over here. That said, let's get into things. Now, first, a lot of the research for this comes actually from NASA, and I think that that's going to be super important going forward for part of this narrative, because that actually led me down a bit of a trail that I wasn't expecting to go down. But first of all, if you're wondering, is there evidence for global warming? Well, yes, there is. We have evidence, and NASA has done a lot of research on this, and that research has been peer-reviewed, that shows that we are in unprecedented just areas of warming in the world right now. Think about what December was for many of you this year. It wasn't a fucking cold winter at all for most of us in December. We're moving into January. We're getting a winter storm. We're getting a cold snap, but that's probably something to talk about as well. But before we get into that aspect of the climate where things become more unstable and therefore big freezes, big storms like this are more common, let's go ahead and look at the facts in general. Just for those of you who may be skeptical, we do know that our global temperature is rising. We do have a graph that shows a lot of that, and this is over the course of several years. There's often a narrative amongst conspiracy theorists that, oh, well, the world goes through these natural cycles of warming and cooling, and that's true, because if we look at this graph, we can see that over the past 800,000 years, we have found evidence of that natural cycle of cooling and of warming. But today, we are at a massive peak. We hit our previous peak in 1911, like the peak compared to the last 800,000 years, where we were able to gather data, you know, back just the same way we do when we're doing any type of dating. We can gather data going back thousands of years. So what we find is that we are in what previously would have been considered a peak, and then we just kept going the fuck up. In general, our average carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere, which has a correlative effect and causative effect with how warm the Earth is generally, we have kept on going up and up and up and up and up in those levels, and that hasn't fucking changed. NASA points out that our average surface temperature has risen about 2 degrees since the late 19th century, which is very, very, just that is the kind of change that can cause an entire ecosystem to fucking shift. This, of course, has led to ice sheets shrinking and glaciers retreating from their previous sizes, and this has meant that sea levels start to rise as a result. And this, of course, gets us to the winter storm. Extreme weather events have been increasing in frequency over the last 50 years, or really over the last 70 years. If we pop over to worldwildlife.org to contextualize that a little bit, hurricanes, I grew up in Florida, so this is one of the things that matters to me, but hurricanes can be accompanied by intense winds, heavy rain, storm surges. Climate change specifically, though, because it increases the amount of temperature in the ocean, atmosphere, etc., because those temperatures increase and because the amount of sea that we are dealing with increases, we get increased rainfall rates, we get increased chances for storm surges, we get higher peak wind rates. So if you're used to wind being 40 miles an hour, now it's 50 miles an hour is a bad example there. The intensity, the duration, the frequency of natural disasters like hurricanes starts to increase. We're seeing wildfires grow in scale, frequency, and intensity as well. What this means is that what we have is a world where our winter ended up being far warmer than normal, and this keeps happening at an increased rate. Our summers start getting unbearably hot compared to previous summers, and that rate's going to increase even more. And then every now and again, you'll get one of these cold snaps. You'll get one of these incredible winter storms, and these will start to become more frequent as well. So instead of having an environment that is naturally cooling and warming like it normally does, we are going to have more of these extreme weather events. And this ends up playing into conservative narratives, at least Donald Trump's narratives, a lot, because then they can point to these extreme weather events and say that, oh, look, I thought that global warming was happening, despite the fact that when you look at the actual data, all of the things that would lead to the Earth getting warmer over time are still happening. All of that is still happening. Our climate is still becoming a warmer climate. And these cold snaps are nothing but a red herring that the administration gets to use in order to downplay the effects of, well, that's actually a good question. The effects of what? What would actually be the benefit of lying to the American public about this? And, you know, there's a couple of ways you can go about this. You can go down the conspiracy route where, oh, the government lies to us about everything, therefore, blah, 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 blah. You can do that. Or we can actually take this bit of information that we've been looking at, one of the main resources for studying this data, NASA, and we could start using that as our breadcrumb to see what has this administration done in regards to NASA. And that's what led me over to here. So this is from space.com. This is not like a government org or even like Associated Press or anything like that. This is just a website reporting on a thing that the website owners like. Space.org, obviously they're going to like NASA. But check this out. Check this out. Trump's 2026 budget slashes NASA's funding by 24% and cuts its workforce by nearly a third. And for those of you that might think that this is a normal thing, well, no, this is the biggest single-year cut to NASA in our entire history, like since the organization was created. And then, of course, their funding will be cut by another 47% next year. Money is being hemorrhaged out of NASA to go towards other things, to go towards other directives within the United States government. And you may be okay with that. I am not, because I do believe that having a giant organization that has funding that is able to perform unbiased tests on our atmosphere, unbiased tests basically everywhere it needs to in order to gather information and data for us so that we can operate with actual information that is reliable is fantastic. Yes, there are places like SpaceX that are doing this kind of research privately, but they are going to be beholden to shareholder interests, private equity interests. And ignoring the fact that it's Elon Musk's interests specifically, I do not trust private interests. Maybe it's the socialist in me, but I don't trust private fucking capital. So I would rather something that is accountable to the American people be what is doing that research in general, not having the funding cut for that so that it can go to the military or being used to inflate ICE's budget so it can deport more brown people. Now, why would you be cutting NASA's funding? Well, there are a couple of reasons. Private interest in the space field are one of them. We know that Trump and Elon Musk were very buddy-buddy when a lot of this, like the groundwork for this stuff, was being put down. So, of course, not having what's to a private firm, what seems to be direct competition, not fighting against you, maybe that is one of those fun little motivating factors there. But there's another one, another more direct one that has less to do with giant billionaire drama and has more to do with standard money and corruption in politics as it always has existed. You see, 1 year ago, Donald Trump signed an executive order called the National Energy Emergency, which basically said that America needed to become more energy independent from other nations. And of course, we're starting to see why he wanted to do that. We'll put a pin in that. But he wants us to be more energy independent from other nations. And one of the ways to do that is by importing less oil. And so we get more private United States oil companies that are drilling to the nines to get as much oil as they can. We are going from a transition to more green energy, away from fossil fuel vehicles into more electric vehicles, away from coal and fossil fuels for our power and into things like nuclear and wind and water energy. We are moving away from a lot of those green initiatives because, and this one is where I have to put the conspiracy hat on a little bit, kind of, sort of, but it's because Donald Trump has actually been bought by billionaires. So Donald Trump is cutting $84 billion that were wrapped up in several clean energy projects and refocusing those on fossil fuels instead. Well, why? Because he was funded by the fossil fuel industry largely during his campaign. Millions, billions of dollars were spent on his campaign by fossil fuel companies. Now, I may be being a little hyperbolic when I move the numbers into the billions there, but check this out. Even after Trump's victory in 2024, oil and gas interests have continued to pour money into his political operations. They've given $11.8 million to his inauguration fund, and even though Trump cannot run for a third term, his main super PAC has raked in millions more from the oil industry since he took office, including $25 million from oil producer Energy Transfer Partners and its CEO, Kelsey Warren. As promised, Trump is rewarding the oil industry by adopting its policy agenda as his own. He signed a legislative package, which one executive deemed positive for us across all of our top priorities, giving oil and gas firms $18 billion in tax incentives while rolling back the clean energy incentives. The clean energy incentives, of course, that are referenced here in the Reuters article. And I'll have all these links in the description below if you want to read through them yourself. But this paints a pretty strong picture of what is happening. You see, Research that directly contradicts how good the fossil oil industry is for us in the United States is being produced in large part by NASA. And NASA, being as unbiased as it can be in the scientific fields, is going to continue to produce that research. So its funding gets cut. And where does that funding go? Tax incentives to giant oil companies. Well, what does this mean? Well, it means what it's always meant. The President of the United States is a bot patsy. He is a person who gets to be the figurehead of our government, but the actual people who are running the show are oligarchs behind the scenes. People who we have not elected, we don't get any say in, but they are the ones who nonetheless are pushing his agendas. People like the Heritage Foundation that wrote Project 2025, and people like, well, Kelsey and the rest of the fossil fuel industry who bankrolled his campaign in large part and are now reaping the benefits of having bankrolled the guy who wants to send us back, not to the Stone Age, but at least to the 1920s, where we started this trend of peaking our CO2 emissions in the first place. Again, the pattern seems fairly clear. You get the guy who is bankrolled by the oil companies, and that guy has an incentive to lie about science because he is bankrolled by people who need to lie about what the science is to convince the public that they are still relevant and they are still needed for your day-to-day lives. So he starts undercutting their funding. Electric vehicle industries, the tax incentives that we had for electric vehicles just got deleted this year. I bought an electric vehicle last year, mostly so I could save money on oil prices. That was one of the big things. I don't have to do oil changes. I have less repairs. I'm able to just charge my car at my own house. Honestly, it's a really convenient vehicle to have. I'm not going to lie. I didn't pick it up because I wanted to do like Brian from Family Guy and buy a Prius to save the world. I bought it because of personal convenience. But I did get a tax incentive for it, and that was nice. I'm not even going to lie. That was a very, very helpful thing in making that decision for me personally. That aside, that's just a personal thing. Like I said, you have a president who is bought. That president is then going to defund organizations that are counterintuitive to the interests of the organizations that are puppeteering him, and we get to deal with the side effects here. I may be going without power here in the next day or two because of the giant freeze, and more of these insane weather situations are going to end up happening, and NASA is going to keep trying to report on how, hey, these insane weather conditions, they happen irrespective of human beings, but they happen more frequently when we keep on fucking with our own atmosphere by not actually trying to be responsible when it comes to the CO2 we are emitting into the atmosphere. And this sounds like, I know this sounds like one of those things that is the side effect of me having grown up in the 90s and like growing up with Captain Planet and all that shit, where we were told to be, good little environmentalist babies. I understand that. My issue is, more than anything, that capital that you and I cannot vote on, capital that you and I do not have influence with, capital that neither you nor I are going to be benefiting from, is reaping the benefits of making Americans suffer, and they are making Americans suffer by depleting us of the departments that actually do good work in scientific fields to give us accurate information that we can shape policy around. The policy is being shaped around the idea of making more money for the industries that have bought and paid for our politicians than is actually being done to help us as a nation of people who pay the taxes that write the paychecks for 90% of these troglodytes in the first fucking place. When I saw that post, I just wanted to sit here and make fun of the president being an idiot. That's what I wanted to do, because it is an idiotic statement to say, oh my god, it's cold, what happened to that global warming? But then, when I think about it more and more, it's not just president's dumb, therefore he said a dumb thing. It's president is saying a thing to signal to his base that climate change is not real, global warming, as we once called it colloquially, is not real, and it's because he's been bought by the people who are incentivized to continue telling you that those things are not real, so they can keep selling you things that are actively going to be destroying the environment, and have been for a while now, and the data for that has been available for a while now. And that data is being largely provided by people that our president wants to undercut funding to, because it's all part of the same plan. Enrich himself, make more money, make him more popular and well-liked in the circles of the haves, and fuck all of us have-nots, I guess. But that is just a rant that I felt like I needed to go on more than anything, because I saw that post and it took me down a rabbit hole, so now you've gone down the rabbit hole with me. Let me know what you think in the comments section below, and if you want to see more videos like this where I just find something and then I go, well, let me see where this leads me, then let me know in the comment section below. I want to do some more experimentation with my content. That's why we've got a new lighting setup in here. That's why I've been flitting between edited content with the VTuber model where I get to do skits, and now I'm doing some stuff like this. I want to see what is working well for y'all, and I also want to do stuff that is fun for me to make. So I'll see you guys Saturday. I'm going to be doing a stream on Saturday as long as I can. If the freeze ends up knocking out my power, then I won't be on stream for that long, I guess. But I do want to hop on there and try to hang out with all y'all until the freeze happens. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hopefully I'll see you all in the next one. Subscribe if you haven't already. Do all that stuff that the algorithm enjoys. Thank you very much for being here. It's been a wild 8 years on this platform with all of y'all, and we are going into the 9th right now, so thank you for being here. I will see you all in the next one. Insert end to video tagline here.